And greetings, visitors to the paper prison. It is I, your host, the comics prisoner, sentenced for crimes against comics illustration to be forever confined to beautiful pieces of comic art and to sing its praises. Welcome back. Well, they say that being in lockup can drive you crazy, but it can also drive you mad, as I find myself today confined within a beautiful 2-page spread from that wonderful magazine, Mad Magazine, drawn by an artist who I've admired and adored for such a long time and have not said anywhere near enough about the wonderful Mort Drucker. Now, before I start talking about Mort, I really need to talk a little bit about what Mad Magazine means to me. You see, I've often said in this show that for young people my age, comic books, especially the Marvel comics, was a great soft intro into the arts and often into literature. But Mad Magazine was often my intro to cinema. Now, I know many have written about how Mad was a subversive and insightful critique and satire of life. As a young man, I didn't see it that way. I picked up Mad Magazine for the laughs, which were plentiful, but also so I could catch up on movies. You see, I grew up in a small southeastern town, and without going into too much detail, getting to a movie house was really difficult for me. I don't think I ever saw a first-run movie in a theater until I was 16. Until that time, it had to be rerun on TV, and you can imagine how much that was cut up. But it also made things difficult with my schoolmates who could go see movies. And I was always felt like I was out of the loop. And then came Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine with its scathing movie satires. Now, you could say that Mad Magazine ruined a lot of movies for me because while it did make fun of the movies, it also spilled all the plot details. But I was cool with that. Because thanks to Mad Magazine, I knew all the hip info on movies. When I was watching Saturday Night Live, I could get all the movie satires on Saturday Night Live because I had the context of Mad Magazine to know what they were making fun of. For me, reading Mad Magazine was like having a subscription to Variety magazine at 12. Okay, now that that's out of the way, and I gotta say though, inextricably linked to Mad Magazine is the name Mort Drucker. When I think of Mad Magazine, I immediately think of Mort Drucker, but strangely enough, then I immediately think of 3 artists at once. I think of Mort, I think of John Severin, and I think of Al Hirschfeld. Why is that? Well, first off, I saw John Severin not as the anti-Mort, but more like 2 sides of the same coin. I associated Mort with Mad Magazine. I associated John Severin with Cracked Magazine. Clearly, they were 2 different kinds of artists. I think John Severin only had one style, which he used everywhere. The art that you saw in Mad Magazine, especially his Star Wars adaptation, or satire, could have just as easily played in a Marvel Comics adaptation of Star Wars. Again, when I was young, there wasn't much access to pop culture or media. If you can believe me trying to approximate a likeness of Mark Hamill by looking at Howard Chaykin's drawings, you can imagine how frustrating that was. However, the likenesses of the Star Wars cast and the cracked Star Wars satire was amazing. And John Severin is just a wonderful artist, and he shall get an episode down the line soon in The Comics Prisoner. The other person I'm thinking of is famous Broadway caricaturist Al Hirschfeld. As far as I'm concerned, no matter how much fame and laurels that are heaped upon Hirschfeld, Drucker and Hirschfeld, to me, on the same level. Just, again, maybe two sides of the same coin. While I admit that Hirschfeld is a genius, I would not want to read a Mad Magazine satire drawn by Hirschfeld. I think it just couldn't work as a story. I would just be looking at each individual drawing, and I think it would be a little too much. His caricatures are brilliant, but also almost monstrous, but it works. So, and then that brings us back to Mort Drucker, the wonderful genius. So let's talk a little bit about Mort, okay? Mort was born in March 22nd, 1929, same year as my parents. Died, unfortunately, on April 8th, 2020. A long life, for sure. He probably had the typical, post-depression life that every post-depression kid had, although he did get some art training. In 1947, he met with comics legend Will Eisner, who saw potential and recommended Mort for his first job doing a newspaper strip. And for almost the next 10 years, he had gainful employment working on strips that were, humorous, along the lines of Archie Comics, until in 1956 he found himself in the offices of Mad Magazine, and the editors there gave him a shot. And everyone involved, including Mort, was grateful from then on. Even Mort Drucker was surprised at how well he could do this. He had not, up until this time, considered himself a caricaturist. But when he had that script and sat down, he just did it. And the rest was going to be almost a 50-year history. I often say that comics is alchemy. It's not just the talents, it's the combination of talents. In this case, with Mort Drucker, it was a combination of skills. Not only was he a natural and strong, powerful caricaturist, he also could tell a story. It wasn't just, a bunch of talking heads. The bodies moved, the placement, the staging. It was the whole package. And I don't know if he did his gray tones or that was someone else, but again, this was a black and white periodical, remember. This was a black and white periodical that stood on its own as a piece of art. Not only that, it was a black and white periodical, Mad Magazine, that ran without advertisements. Publisher Bill Gaines said he didn't want advertisers telling him what he can put in his magazine, so he didn't have any. We're talking about a magazine that was not only successful but hugely profitable solely on unit sales. Can you think of any magazine that isn't being held aloft by their advertising? I can't. So let's look at this beautiful 2-page spread that I have the good fortune of finding myself confined in. It is one of the things about comic art is being able to draw the eye from panel to panel so that you can direct the reader from one panel to the next, from one page to the next, all the way through the story until you've read the comic book, or in this case, the magazine. And as we just follow along the visual pathways, just bring you along, and there's wonderful likenesses, though caricatured likenesses, of not only the cast, but of guest stars like Jackie Mason and, let's see, was that Wallace down there from 60 Minutes? So aside from the wonderful storytelling, which has to be there, I mean, you can't, like I said, everything on the page has to work, and it does. This guy is a master. But let's talk about the likenesses, because really it's what it's all about right now. And let's compare him to Hirschfeld. Yes, Drucker does distort and caricature and exaggerate, though not to the degree Hirschfeld with. Hirschfeld's faces look like they ran to a brick wall at 90 miles an hour. Mort Drucker's faces just look like you've caught them in the most extreme range of motion while they speak. and as such, they seem so alive, more alive than a photograph would be. Yes, I know I'm really laying on the praise now, but that's what happens when you're a fan and you see something that just frankly, stands the test of time and is going to outlive us and is always going to be looked back on. And it's funny that this might be the height, well, I don't know if it's the height of Drucker's powers, but the thing he's working on here, Seinfeld parody, it was at the height of its powers. Two humor giants colliding into a wonderful newsprint product. I give you the lower bottom right drawing of George and Jerry together, and it is just wonderful. Yes, there is high art and there is commercial art, but sometimes you just have to be judged on how well you do a thing. And what Mad Magazine was supposed to do was to make you happy. And these pages make me happy. They make me laugh. It's fun. It's a great way to spend a few minutes. So I think I've said really all I can right now. Again, like Tom Palmer, Drucker is a fellow whose mastery of the art is so great, I don't know if I can adequately comment on it. I too have worked as a caricaturist. I've paid the rent quite a bit with that, so I understand what he's doing, and I've done similar stuff, but not to this level of proficiency. So again, I'm going to just leave this here for you to enjoy. Once again, the warden tells me that visiting hours are over, so we're going to have to wrap this up. I'm going to leave this here for you to enjoy. If you like what you've seen here, please feel free to like, subscribe, smash the bell, tell your friends. That's really the most important thing. I'm just trying to, make a little community here. We're all going to have a lot of fun, and I'd like to hear your opinions in the comments, or go to the Facebook fan page, and that's another way you can comment. If you'd like to see more of the work of Mort Drucker and the usual gang of idiots of Mad, fortunately there is many a bound volume that can be found at your bookstore and online, Amazon apparently. I have not played around with the new DC app. I do not know if Mad Magazine is included in there. Something I have to look into. So that's it. So, as I like to say, 4 walls do not a prison make, but comics can be a very cool prison. Take care.